look at the concentration camp guards, I think I asked you guys like in the first or second week of school this whole year, how many of you think you could have been one? And you could have done what they did. And it's hard for us to, I would suggest to you that if your immediate answer is, I would never have, well, then you probably don't know yourself very well. Because the amount of pressure, social pressure, even physical pressure, of course, would have been overwhelming. And then you can start to reason it out. Listen, these prisoners, they're gonna die anyway. Why should I join them and die also? Whether I do it or whether that person does it, they're still gonna die. So you can start to rationalize it and have it make sense to you. But the truth is that everybody in here is probably a person, I imagine by now. And everybody in here is probably also a monster. And so how you kind of interact with those two things, your shadow and your persona, is going to be the project. So who here hasn't asked themselves at some time, am I a monster or is this what it is to be a person? Yeah, probably almost everybody's hand I imagine would go up if I asked you that question. Because really, how many of you actually stopped and thought about that? Am I a monster? Or is this what it is to be a person? Does anybody in here really give it that much thought? Probably not. She's asking this question, and it's almost a silly question. You'd have to be asking this question like in a very select group of people, like probably like philosophers, and not even new ones, but like ones who've been around for a while. So there's probably like 20 people in the whole country who would hear this question and nod and go, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I ask myself that all the time. Very few people probably ever ask themselves this question. I'm not going to say that that's a fundamental question that we have to ask ourselves, but there are these fundamental questions that we do fail to ask ourselves. And it's so obvious. Like, for example, like to be a student. If I were to ask you, what is it to be a student? And that is what you are, a student. But I wonder how many answers we would get. I wonder how many would be like, I don't know, I don't know, like do work. Okay, but what else? Like to be the embodiment of a student. Like, we're talking about the archetypes, for example. And some of you, I hope, took that archetype test to find out which one you most match up with. Because if you know what your archetype is, then you know how it is that you're supposed to go about living. So in other words, if you're the hero, then you go, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be. So what do I have to do? And then you can set your life up in a path where you can follow the heroic path. If you're the innocent, you can set up your life such that you can follow what it is to be the innocent. And then once you have a direction, you know which way to go. So if I would ask you, what is it to be a student? I don't know. Well then, yeah, no wonder we all kind of like meander through this. It's like, as a teacher, what is it to be a teacher? And these are fundamental questions that anytime we take on a role, if you're going to be a parent someday, then what is it to be a father? What is it to be a mother? And I hope you recognize that those are two very different things. And so what is it to be a parent? What is it to be whatever job you're going to go into? But that most fundamental question of what is it to be a person is so deep and intricate, and yet it's so important. And it's one of those things I would say really genuinely, you get it or you don't. You get it or you don't. In other words, it gives you such a, if you're hearing this and you're thinking like, it's just not important, well, it matters on several scales. So for example, should we pursue artificial intelligence? Yeah. We have yeses, we have nos. Why not? Why not? Why not? Why wouldn't we want to pursue it? Yeah. So what would be wrong with developing that? So it's like having me around. What's the worst that could happen? We forget how to do stuff, but we won't need to because AI can do that for us now. Yeah, but if it's always there, we can depend on it. It's not like my dad, it's always going to be there. So why shouldn't we develop it? There's an underlying thing that I imagine many of you aren't thinking of. What's the worst it can do? I'm not moving from here until someone says it. Because this is so obvious, man. What's the worst our AI can do? Take over. Yeah. Take over and kill us all. But so what? Why does it matter if it's humans here or machines here? And there's something in us that's like, well, but we don't want to take us over. But why not? If it'll take care of you, if it'll do everything for you. Unless you recognize that there's something wrong with that, and you have to be able to explain what's wrong with it. I mean, if we really are about the survival of the fittest, and if we really do believe that's a good thing, shouldn't we want AI to take over and kill us all off? And by the way, I ask you that question, and there are people who believe that. They believe that, yeah, we should, humanity is a virus on the earth, and we should get rid of it. Well, if you believe that about people, if you believe that about humanity, then it's going to affect how it is that you behave. If you have a real conception about what a person is, I mean, heck, isn't that the whole debate about abortion? Isn't that what it comes down to? What is it? Is a fetus a human being, or is it not? All that other stuff about my body, that's all just silly talk, man. What it is because no one's talking about one person's body, they're talking about the body of the fetus. The fetus has its own DNA, it's its own body. Duh. That's obvious to anybody who thinks about it for 3 seconds. But we get emotionally charged about it because we might not like where that goes. But here's the thing, so what if it's a human being? Why can't you kill it? Why not? Well, because it's wrong. Why is it wrong? What matters is not that it's a human being. What matters is whether or not you're a person. And then you start to realize that a person and a human being are two very different things. A person is a personality. A human being is a collection of DNA. Those two things are not always the same thing. So the whole debate comes down to that one question. And we spend so much time arguing and fighting about it. Well, if we just answer that one question, we could actually probably agree on it, even if we emotionally didn't like it. And so these are all really deep questions that if I were to ask you guys, so how many of you guys think about these things? My guess is almost nobody. Why? Because they're not interesting to you. I know there's probably one or two of you out there who's like, yeah, these are interesting questions. But for the most part, most of the world, we just want to live. We don't want to have that debate. We don't want to figure out what a human being is. We don't want to figure out if AI should be around or not. We just want to wake up, go to work, come home, live a life, hang out with friends, and just kind of live. And that's it. That's it. So when we ask these kinds of questions like, who hasn't asked themselves this stuff? That's most of us. That's most people. I was talking with last period, and somebody brought up in their explanation concentration camp guards, and I was just asking okay, so were these monsters? And it was quite shocking. Many of my students were saying, no, they're just following orders. I'm like, so if you're following orders and it's totally okay, yeah. So I asked, well, then I hope you're not angry at the ICE agents who are showing up in National City. And they're like, well, wait, that's different. How's it different? Are they just following orders? Are you okay with them because they're just following orders? And that's so weird that we will hear that and not see the obvious parallel. I'm not saying that ICE agents are Nazis. I'm not saying that they're not. I'm not saying what they are. I'm just saying it's an obvious real-life scenario for something like that. And so, yeah, but most evil, like I said before, is done by people who don't decide to be good or evil. They just decide to live, and that's how most of us are. And there's nothing wrong with it. If we just want to live, we just want to live. That's fine. But there are these deeper questions that some people do pursue, and that is a hell of a question. Is this what it is to be a person? When you look at the concentration camp guards, I think I asked you guys in the first or second week of school this whole year, how many of you think you could have been one? And you could have done what they did. And it's hard for us to, I would suggest to you that if your immediate answer is, I would never have, well, then you probably don't know yourself very well. Because the amount of pressure, social pressure, even physical pressure, of course, would have been overwhelming. And then you can start to reason it out. Listen, these prisoners, they're going to die anyway. Why should I join them and die also? Whether I do it, whether that person does it, they're still going to die. So you can start to rationalize it and have it make sense to you. But the truth is that everybody in here is probably a person, I imagine, by now. And everybody in here is probably also a monster. And so how you kind of interact with those two things, your shadow and your persona, is going to be the project. So, oh, this sucked. Questions, comments, concerns? Hey, they can all be bangers, man. That one's not gonna make it to YouTube.